You're listening to another Geek Pride podcast. Welcome to Gentlemanly Chats. Hello and welcome to Freaks, Geeks and Weirdos. I'm the resident beard, Mike Orvis, and today I have with me two people that I'm very happy to have on board, really. This is the first inaugural episode of Freaks, Geeks and Weirdos. There is a episode 0, which is going up probably in the next couple of weeks, but you'll be listening to this in about a month, so it doesn't really make any sense. Anyway, for those of you that haven't listened to episode 0, the idea of Freaks, Geeks and Weirdos is I sit down with some people that society would probably think are a bit weird because they're doing something they love and getting paid for it, or they're doing something they love and they're trying to get paid for it. They're breaking free from the norms, and I find that incredibly interesting, so I sit down with them for an hour or so and interrogate them with prejudice. The year was 2012, and I walked into Whatever Comics in Canterbury and was thumbing through issues of Batman and Superman and a whole host of Marvel stuff. I was quite fresh-faced and new to the comics world, a lot less hairy, a lot thinner. And I picked up a book called Cancer Town, and I had no idea what it was. And I took it to the guy who owned the comic shop, and he said, "This is a guy," and he called him Dethan. That's wrong. I found that out today. He said, "This guy called Dethan. He's great. You want to check him out?" I'm like, "Okay, cool." And he did me a deal on a couple from the publisher Marcosia. I took them home. I read them, and I think there were a couple of books that I can't even remember now, but Cancer Town in particular completely blew my mind. It kind of had it was like John Constantine, kinda, but a little bit more angry, and that really, I don't know. It's difficult to explain. The reason it's difficult to explain, ladies and gentlemen, is because I'm sitting across from the people who are behind Cancer Town and a myriad of other books. They are one of my favourite teams in comics. We have got Dethan and Nic Wilkinson. Hi, guys.
How's it going?
Yeah, not bad. What have you been up to?
Loads of stuff.
Okay.
Mostly writing, a huge amount of which I'm not really able to talk about yet. But
Okay.
Hopefully there's enough stuff that's already done.
Sure.
We're not going to just be sitting... Do we all have to talk as loud as you, by the way? Because this
No, I know. I tell you what I'll do. I'll move the mic over here because I'm just in podcast mode, so I'm loud. So yeah, how you're currently, or can I talk about Indifference Engine 2?
Yeah.
Cool. So having read Indifference Engine 1 last night, again as sort of a recap, what brought you to sort of begin writing Indifference Engine 1?
Well, okay. I mean, it started off basically as most of my early books did, as a vicious fucking migraine on the Isle of Wight. Well, I think my first 3 books can all be attributed to migraines and the various neurological disturbances that accompany them. I get the full thing. I go blind in one eye.
Yeah.
Paralysis in the limbs. And
No way.
Also there's a moment right when you turn the corner and you realise that you're A, probably going to live through this, and B, actually want to. That I tend to get this sort of flood of creative energy, and what occurred to me, in one of those little floods of endorphins, was that I could write the story about a guy who goes to war with an army composed entirely of superhuman alternate reality versions of himself. It's the kind of thing that really, you have to be a little bit sideways. When you come up with it. And I was pretty lucky to get sort of teamed up, because at the time this was back in the dark days of Insomnia Publishing, before they went the way of all flesh, under circumstances that nobody yet fully understands.
Right.
And Marcosia sort of stepped in and saved the day with it. But I got teamed up with Rob Carey, and the concept of the story really was very much paired with the relationship that existed between Rob and me, which is that I wanted to take something that was basically just very benign and see if I could kind of just torture it enough that it could be trained to bite. And that was what we did with Alan Blake.
Right.
And it was kind of what happened with Rob. What Rob did was that, because this was my second book that I wrote, although it was the third one that came out. We didn't know any better, and I think that's probably my only defence for the majority of things. There is a certain virtue, I think, that comes with the ignorance of what the rules are and where the lines are drawn.
Yeah.
And I was not in a position to advise Rob on when he'd go too far, and he was not in a position to advise me. And it was a very young publisher who just kind of wanted to get the most bizarre, to make the weirdest shaped footprint that they could in the industry. And so it was this. You
certainly helped do that.
This harmonic convergence of ignorance, brute force, and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
That brought that story out. And then when I came to write the sequel, it occurred to me that really this story wasn't finished, because we'd put the character in a position where he started off falling, basically in an uncontrolled plummet, and we'd left him more or less where he needed to be there, which was still falling toward the end, literally.
Yeah.
From the very outset of the first chapter to the very last panel on the last one, he's in this huge personal, physical, and spiritual plummet, and it felt like maybe we needed to then just see where we'd held back a little too much in the first one and do something that was possibly a little less reserved with it, and really just kick off the training wheels.
Okay.
And see what we could do with following this to the most illogical extreme that we could. That we still, it has to be wholly consistent, and yet still something hopefully people haven't seen before, and certainly haven't seen in the previous volume.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, where you said you like to bring things that people haven't really seen before. In the 4 or 5 years that I've been digging on comics, sort of in a more hardcore capacity, I think you've brought to me as a reader things that I've never seen before, like the shaman from Slaughterman's Creed killing someone with his own piss.
that was one where I actually, and I said to Nick, do you think, have I actually gone too far? have I actually gone mental with this, or is this just the ideal way to introduce this character? And that was sort of set up in my mind that I wanted to have this guy murdering a paralysed drug dealer that he had personally paralysed.
Yeah.
He's not a sicko. He just got picked on an invalid. But he's it was. But I needed an element to it which there was not quite there. Drowning him in his own piss, but this isn't about just finding a shock moment, which would be an absolutely noble end in its own right. But we needed some kind of an element to it. And then I was talking to Nick, and she said, "Well, did you know that this is a thing that actually happened? Did you want to pick this up?"
Well, hello everyone. I was just going to interject, really, to say it wasn't just that Si thought up that we'd had this discussion about shamanic practice or things like that further down the line when we've been talking about the book. It's that I was just falling asleep. I was just in that kind of, just getting a bit sort of floaty and just gonna, Nick, wake up, quick! I've thought of the perfect thing. I was like, what? It's like, now this might be going too far. Tell me if it's going too far. But what if he pissed in his mouth and drowned him? And then it kind of it went on from there.
And
really. I went, no, it sounds fine.
Anything that's going to let you shut the fuck up and let me go back to sleep.
But she then went on to explain to me that this was in a less violent context. This was actually a thing that was it had historical precedence.
Right.
In that as a shamanic ritual. There was you couldn't just go in and go, I want to be a shaman, because the first time you took any of the drugs that they had to take to provoke the experiences, they'd either die or go irretrievably insane.
Right.
So you had to build up your immunities, and one of the ways of doing that was actually drinking the urine of the elder.
Oh right.
She filtered it.
Yeah.
So, you became kind of so there was sort of a literal passing of the.
So had he survived, the drug dealer, had he survived, that could possibly have been his initiation into a whole new world.
That would have been his origin there.
But
and this is why superheroes
sadly,
have secret origins. It's not one that he would have publicised, probably. But that's.
For every supervillain that you get, there are a lot that just die in the creation process. They never make it off the table, so to speak.
Well, I appreciate that scene on a number of levels that I didn't originally, because we actually had the first, when we were releasing Cancer Town at Bristol?
Yeah, Bristol. Yeah.
So we were there, and there was we'd done this crazy thing with pre-orders, so we actually got massive sales, like 150.
Oh, that's great.
Copies on the day, which was insane. But like 80 something of them were pre-orders. 87 of them were pre-orders.
The thing is, it was before Kickstarter, so the idea of pre-ordering indie comics and stuff like that had not really taken off. So we kind of did it at exactly the right time. It was a new thing that people hadn't really seen before. See the art, see the thing. You can put a pre-order down. Sadly, you can't replicate that now because there's all sorts of ways to.
Were pretty crazy. But one of the people who was in the queue to pick up their copy was this sort of tall, lanky, dreadlocked, sort of crusty guy in his early 20s, and so I looked at Nick, and Nick looked at me, and then we all went and found Stephen Downey, and we all looked at this guy, and went, "Is that Mr. Green?" And I was like, yeah, well, so we grabbed hold of him. Turns out he was a local writer called Ollie Masters,
right?
And we made him. Now, can you just stand as if you're in the middle of the Ramada bar? We've got Stephen Downey kneeling, looking up at him with the camera. Now, can you just look as if you're pissing into somebody's mouth that's right about where the lens is? And we're getting him to do this stuff, and he doesn't know us really. I mean,
because Stephen had said to me beforehand, he went, "Can I ask him? Can I ask him?" I was like, "Yeah, you ask him, but I'm not asking him."
And that guy, now with a much more sensible haircut, that guy has recently secured I think it's an 8-issue deal with Vertigo in his own book called The Kitchen.
Yeah,
that's great.
It's just come out.
The first 3 are out now, I think.
It's very good.
That's awesome.
It's like an old school Vertigo book. Remember when Vertigo, back in, before your time, perhaps, but way back in like sort of 1990-ish, the early, really inventive, really quite beautiful ideas for Vertigo. He's written something there that has gone right back to the heart of what made Vertigo great. So just a little plug for someone who
yeah, no, that's great. That's great.
Because anytime one of the good guys has a success, I throw a little party in my brain for every time that happens.
Sure. You mentioned about how the book spawned from a migraine. And now there's this theory that when you're going through any sort of illness that's kind of severe, and that can be a really bad migraine, it could be like, and I'm going to attribute it because I had the neurovirus a while back. Yeah, but my brain did some weird stuff while I was in the bathroom crying, and it sounds exactly like the process that you've just described. So, with the very limited amount of biology that I know, do you think maybe it's in the same way that when your body thinks it's dying, you see your life flash before your eyes, and the reason your body's doing that is because it's trying to find an experience that you've lived before and trying to help you get out of that. So maybe your brain's making weird connections because it's like, I'm in so much pain, I don't know what to do, I'm dying. Make these weird connections, and your brain makes jumps that it wouldn't necessarily make because you're under duress. Maybe. Just a thought, just an idea.
Yeah, I I'd be hesitant to offer medical advice on a podcast.
Yeah, guys, get the norovirus.
I would
Get a pen ready.
I was once really ill and in a lot of pain and sort of fainting, and I saw a colour that doesn't exist, and I can still imagine that colour, but I can't obviously show it or describe
That's
it.
amazing.
And all I can tell you was it was a merging of green and purple and sort of
Right.
glowy. And I
Okay.
can still visualise it, but obviously there's no way to put that down because it doesn't really exist.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Huh. We'll get into deeper philosophical conversations.
I think, to be honest, the migraine thing is something that I've tried to rely less upon.
Well, yeah.
Over the years, because it's not something you want to, and they're easy enough to provoke. They're not quite so easy to get rid of.
Yeah.
And so it's not that. I mean, I'm trying now to get my inspiration from other sources.
Mm.
But there's a historical precedent for people with migraines writing
There is.
very philosophical. Probably no one else is interested, but
No.
Hildegard of Bingen, who was a nun in
Okay.
14th, 15th century, had the whole crenulation, migraines and stuff like that, and she wrote all this stuff about having experienced the city of God and things like that. And
Oh,
it was
right.
all, now they think it was kind of migraine-induced hallucination.
Very strange.
My
Very
brain doesn't
strange.
interpret those things in a religious context.
And
but,
who was the one who did? Oh, I can't remember the other one. There's another famous nun who had this whole thing about the piercing ecstasies of Christ that they think was migraine induced, and
Oh, right.
you had a bit of an obsession with unicorns that the Pope had to put a ban out on. You are not in this convent allowed to talk any more about piercing unicorns. You've gone too far.
That's brilliant. I mean, I've been doing some reading about the fourth dimension, because it's something that I don't entirely understand, and when I don't understand something, I try and learn about it. And it's this idea that we all live in the third dimension, and like when you draw a circle around an ant, it can't get out of that circle because ants can only really perceive in the second dimension because don't get it. So maybe we simply need to find a way of shifting our consciousness to understand the fourth dimension, and we can break out of these, go through these walls, and maybe we're in a big circle that we don't understand.
Have you read Flatland? And then what's the sequel?
No,
to
I haven't. No.
So Flatland was written in the late 1800s.
Okay.
I think, and it's this thing about it's written about shapes. So there's square and circle, and they're two-dimensional shapes.
Okay.
And sphere, goes into Flatland, and there's sort of characters and how do they relate and how do they understand it?
Yeah.
How do they understand through dimensions and stuff like that?
Ah.
And then somebody, I don't know, about 10 years ago wrote a sequel to it, which was basically the same thing but about the fourth dimension. It's kind of more Lewis Carrollian.
Yeah.
That, but it's definitely
Sure.
because it's told as a story, but obviously it brings in all those conceptual ideas of how could you perceive dimensions other than, and the sort of tiny curled up dimensions of string theory and holographic universe and all of that sort of.
I'm going to need a sit down and a coffee for that book.
It's
Then.
it's a sort of book that really is designed specifically and uniquely to have arguments about.
Yeah. That's great.
Well, it does. I mean, obviously, the thing of the sphere as it moves through the third dimension on a flat plane, it just appears to be an
A circle
expanding
that's
and
getting bigger
contracting
and bigger
circle.
and then smaller and smaller because it moves through the picture plane.
Yeah,
Which, when
yeah.
you think about it, is probably how the Hulk works, because there's no way he's getting that extra mass from the
Oh God.
So the Hulk is actually has a fourth spatial dimension that just appears to be expanding as it
Which is why he can survive in space.
makes perfect sense now.
Oh my God.
All right, I'm pitching that.
This is brilliant. You heard it here first.
On record, this will be dated. My Hulk pick.
That's kind of blown my mind a little bit. I'm gonna take that back to one of my other podcasts and blow their minds. So one of my favourite things that you do that I don't really see a lot of is conflicting internal dialogue. It's something that really interests me, and I don't see a lot of other people doing it. Obviously, you've got for the uninitiated, the internal dialogue is, let's say, a Batman comic. Let's say Dark Knight Returns. This would be a good death in the info box. That's Batman's. Obviously, that's Bruce Wayne's internal dialogue. What Psy does, which I haven't seen a lot of, and maybe that's due to my own ignorance, but in my experience, you'll have these conflicting dialogues where someone will say, "Oh, I better not fuck this up," or there's a line in Cancer Town, and I'm not going to quote it verbatim because I can't. Sorry, where the main character is scared. And he's like, "Really, I'm shitting my pants." He's like, "I'm not scared of you." And like outwardly, he's saying, you're not scary. There's nothing you can do that I'm afraid of. And then there's something along the lines of, except for spiders, tigers, that kind of thing. And where did you get the idea for that from?
Well, I mean, actually, as a musician, this probably would strike a chord because I approach the actual process as if you're composing a piece of music, because you have a variety of different tracks that you lay down. So you have the pure visual track, and then I'm just looking at the basic version. You have a dialogue track. You then have an internal monologue or a caption track, and you have sound effects, and you're all playing the same song, but you have your rhythm and your melody and everything lays down. So I think you should never have this situation where the dialogue is restating what's happening in the picture, and the caption restates. There was the old example that's always used for this is an old horror comic where you have a picture of Dracula jumping out of a window. You have a caption that says, "And then Dracula jumps out of the window," and the dialogue is Dracula saying, "Haha, and I will just jump out of the window just like." You really don't need to be joke on a joke on a joke for this. You're far too. This is joke on a joke. Sorry, it comes from the Abrams Zucker films of the 70s, 80s, that where you'd have something happening in the foreground of the picture, you'd have something happening in the background of the picture, but you never have. If you've got a funny line happening at the front, you never have a funny thing happening at the back. If a guy's delivering a completely straight line in the front, then something hilarious is happening behind him that he can't see.
Yeah.
And if there's people just going about their business telling the story in the background, the guy in the front is hilarious.
Yeah.
But you don't do both together because you're missing the whole point of having these so many different layers to it. And obviously the lettering is a huge part of that, because it's not just the words on the page. You're enforcing reading order, you're introducing sound into the panel, which we have no real other way of doing that except through putting the words on the page, and tone, and Nick, just jump in here because this is
okay. So
I'd love for you to sort of, to the uninitiated, lettering's just you just put in the words on the page, but it's so much more than that. Please explain.
As a letterer, I kind of like to think of it in a way that, if you want to extend the musical analogy, the writer is the composer. The art team, and in that you'd say penciler, letterer, penciler, inker, colorist, they are the orchestra. And in the end, although the lettering seems tiny, the lettering's kind of the conductor, because you control pace and you control rhythm, and to a certain extent you control things like you can work with the art or against the art. When I say against the art, that's kind of deliberate opposition. So for example, if you want to control flow reading around the page, like if you want the writer wants someone to do a double take, so obviously the script has to tell the artist this is what happens, the artist draws it, but if you don't want the reader to notice that, and you want them to have this almost kinesthetic response, the same as the character who should be noticing it does a double take, you move the lettering, so they read the lettering and then have to go, oh, what was that, and look back. So to a certain extent you're controlling the reading experience, you're controlling the rhythm, things like what you choose to bold, where you choose to position things. So I like to think that the writer, the artist, they put the characters on the page, they do the things, I make them scream. But there's a whole lot of stuff about what you're doing is making sound visual, and there is no visual component to sound, and it's a really, really alien thing that you're up to. The fact that people who read comics find it natural is just something that you've learnt. It's not. And I was thinking about this the other day because I was thinking about radio plays. In actual fact, it's entirely the opposite to a radio play, where there is nothing visual in a radio play, so everything has to be shown through sound. But there's things like, there is a difference. If you're going to write, the word crunch is often used. When do you use a K and when do you use a C? Because it's a spiky sound. Or what colour is the lettering? Does the lettering reflect the palette of the art, or does it pop against it? Does it fight with it? So where you're talking about things like conflicting internal monologue with what's being said and things like that, how do you do that? Where do you put it in the art? So there's a whole lot of things about placement, about font choice, lots of various different arbitrary rules that different letterers will argue about for for hours and hours at a time. But how when I've been explaining it to people before, I've kind of said to them, if the lettering is off, as a reader of comics, you might not, you go, what's up with that? Why doesn't that quite work? The story is good, the art is gorgeous, there's something that I can't quite, and it will feel like a badly dubbed film, is what it comes down to. It will just feel like,
with none of the enjoyment of watching a badly dubbed
film. It's just not quite right. And I think the letterer really has to understand the writer's rhythm and the artist's shape and style. You can't just go slapping the letters on. So if you see really good letterers, if you see people like or Todd Klein is the god of letterers, Tom Orzechowski, Clem Robbins, Jim Campbell, who I learnt an awful lot from, a lot of them are artists and designers by training. They see the shapes in the art and they understand the rhythms of the dialogue, so it's kind of, it falls in between those two things. So sorry, that's a long ramble about
no, that's absolutely right. I mean, where did you think your conversely, your love of writing and your love of art, I mean, where did that come from? School?
I've always drawn things, to be honest. I mean, I do mostly lettering now. I used to draw, and I still occasionally draw short comics, but I don't really have the time to do it now, or the discipline to draw perspective, so there is that. And then lettering I got into because I was drawing size first Starship Troopers for him, and it suddenly occurred to us, because we'd got that gig by unconventional means. was
do I want to know, or
we got in sideways, but we can.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, we just.
We can talk about that.
Yeah. Was I thought, well, we thought, oh god, well, someone's got to letter it, but in actual fact, my day job and all my training is about communication psychology, and particularly what I do is online communication psychology for my work, and a lot of that is how you make people feel that they should take certain actions. You can't force them, you can't compel them to do it, but whether they feel they're in the right place, whether there's a logical flow to what they should do, why they would do this or that, and it suddenly occurred to me, hang on a minute, that's a bit like lettering, because you're controlling the flow. And got a lot of books, learnt a lot of things. If you're starting out with lettering, do go to Jim Campbell's website and get his free PDF that he's got up there, because that will teach you basically everything you need to know. Go and have a look at Blambot, Nate Peacock's Blambot, and have a look on there, and that will teach you the technique. But the actual drawing people around, I just found I really took to, and then I just enjoyed doing it. And it's the challenge of things like, do you follow characters' eye lines? Can you drag someone from one panel to another?
Yeah.
What is it? Because you would see older comics that would have things like little arrows that would, they show you which panel to read next and things like that. And you shouldn't ever have to have an arrow unless you're doing it for a particular design reason and you want to kind of reflect that. You should never need an arrow.
One of the things that having somebody who understands the psychology of leading people around the page, as well as Nick does, one of the advantages of that is it frees me and the artist up immensely in terms of blocking things out, because I for a lot of what I write, the guy who's talking is off panel, and we're watching the reaction on the guy who's listening. And it's very easy to confuse people with where in filmmaking there's a thing called the 180 degree rule, You never move the camera from one side of a bisecting plane with two characters talking to the other side, so that perceptually the characters change side. In comics, we break that rule all the time.
Yeah.
And again, ignorance, enthusiasm, and the fact that we can. It's a rule that doesn't need to exist quite so much.
Yeah.
Because if I put some dialogue coming from off panel, the secondary purpose of that balloon there is to remind us of the direction in which the person that we're not seeing but are hearing is. So we keep people's. You're drawing something that isn't there. You're creating the image that then through the what McLeod calls closure. You're making the reader fill in the blank of where that person is, so you don't have to do a Dracula jumps out of the window and say, no, you're standing over there in that corner and you're doing that, But really, if you just moved over here, and you don't have to signal things out because it can all be done by implication.
Yeah, that's kind of, so if you're looking at sound effects and things for that sort of thing, if there's a noise that is off panel, for example, you might have that noise break the panel border, so it's coming from in front of the panel, so you're bringing in that sort of third dimension.
Yeah.
Whereas an ambient rumble or something is best placed behind the plane of the characters.
And you might put it behind the characters.
Sure.
Or
we've done that with earthquakes and things for the
Yeah.
Particularly if you've got
Starship Troopers was the last time I used a huge amount of sound effects. But
where I learnt to do that really was I lettered a book called Unbelievable by a writer and artist called Cy Wyatt, which came out. It's all based in Welsh mythology, and there's a point where a huge dragon comes out, and I was doing that, and the dragon's coming down the mountain. I suddenly went, well, the mountain has got in the art. There's all bits coming down the mountain. Really, where is the sound? The sound is coming down the mountain like that. Can I work that into the art? And to be honest, his art style is not that dissimilar to my art style. Mine is slightly scratchier than his, but because I understood the shapes of his art, I could kind of put that in. There's another bit with one of my favourite pieces of lettering I've ever done is the crow tornado, in that there's like these crows that come down in a huge tornado. It's putting the sound of the crows cawing into the tornado in the same kind of, this is like immensely fiddly lettering, but it's kind of where lettering, you start to bring art into lettering, but they're like the crow wings, so you sort of get the feel of the beating wings. So you're always trying to get this kind of physical feel, particularly with large sounds. You want to get the equivalent in the art of that sort of bass boom. So you should sort of feel it. But that's obviously with sound effects. You can't go. The lettering also shouldn't. It's like I was saying about the writing. The lettering shouldn't ever pop out and go, "Oh, look at me!" and poke you in the eyes. But you should feel it. You should be. You should try and get that sort of rumble. But this idea of kind of surround sound of lettering is where is it, and is it inside the art or over the art or behind the art?
One of your best examples of where you were using it in a sort of a mimetic sense was that there's a moment in the first Cantertown book where a character called Evil Twin gets her jaw essentially off, and
by the judge guy.
And there's a scream that accompanies that, and she wanted the scream to be huge, but she didn't want to pull focus away from the visuals, so she arrived on this idea of actually drawing the shape of the scream to mimic the shape of the wound that provoked it, and it's subtle enough that it doesn't leap out at look what she's done there, but at the same time it's an unconscious
reflection of the shape.
It fits so perfectly into the general composition of the panel. She does that all the time now. She's every time, because I tend to use sound effects very sparingly.
I've noticed that.
So I'll generally like if someone's being electrocuted, I'll make a mimetic sound be the scream that they come out. So they'll make a sound that has the requisite number of Zs and KHs and things to imply a sort of a choked.
So you do find yourself thinking about, so if someone is being electrocuted, does it go like, how do you actually write? Is that a Z?
Yeah.
No, is that a Z?
No, I mean that's I have to sit on my own whenever I write comics, because I will be sitting there just going how do I spell I
remember thinking once, so I was doing this dog, and I was saying, so how kind of furry is its voice? How furry?
Do you remember when that there was an artist that I know loosely from Twitter who had put out a call saying, guys, I need a sound effect for what a Judge Dredd style knife sounds like plunging into the neck of a dinosaur. That sound, and I can't quite get it. Well, I replied, well, basically what you need, I think, is something with a percussive start of the blade striking scale that ends in a meteor sort of wet.
Yeah.
So I suggested something like T-CHLUK. So you got a chuck.
Yeah. Okay.
And that went straight in. So
brilliant.
Yeah. So it's there are a lot of ways of getting around the problem of sound in comics, and all of them are kind of desperation measures.
And of course, the sound brings in time, because when you've got a picture, the picture could be taking a second, or that picture could be taking, the universe explodes, 7-page spread, and it could be taking. The minute you put a sound in it, you've pinned it in time.
And one of the hardest things I ever had to write was a scene where time had frozen except for one character, and trying to explain, because everybody is frozen in time, to give the idea that the one character was still animated, still had agency in this panel when nobody else did. It's very tricky, because you're still navigating around. You don't lock the camera down. You're following this character through, and everybody else has to be seen to be not moving, and you don't want to be saying, "Oh look, everybody's not moving" in a caption or a dialogue, because again you've joked on that. And wherever possible, I always think that every word you add to a page is a little bit of artwork that's going to get drowned out. So the artwork really needs to shoulder the burden of narration as much as possible.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me what was my general piece of advice to writers, as much as I'm in a position to even be doing that. But I said, the best piece of advice I could think of is to jab yourself in the eye with the blunt end of a pencil for every word over 28 you've put into that panel.
Right, okay.
You'll never want to do that again. And obviously I break that rule where I have to, because you need to provide personality and things for characters, so they need to have certain rhythm. They can't have just people delivering. You get that situation where, you get this in you still do get this in a lot. It's not unique to comics, but in a lot of storytelling where you end up with the situation of your characters are simply shouting the plot at each other, and you end up with a very flat story that has no real life to it, and the characters have no real life to them. Yeah. So everything you have a character say really should do more than just deliver the plot. Yeah. It should give some insight. So with as few words as possible, you want to imply as much as you can about the character and the situation and the involving narrative. So,
also, actually, behind that, humans are very good at picking up multi-channel cues. So if you, having done this for my work, if you are mapping people's brains when they're looking at things or taking information from a single channel, say reading text or listening to something without any visual input, something like that, typically one area of their brain lights. The minute you get multiple channels, multiple areas of their brain lights up, so you can take in, and given that comics is multi-channel, so you've got story, art, colour, different things that are happening, different tracks within the story itself, people can actually absorb a lot of information, and it's just that's the way human brains are neurologically wired to make sense of your environment, is to take in lots of inputs very, very quickly. So you don't, the more inputs you've got, actually, the less you need to dumb it down, because you're working with how people's brains already work. You don't need to compensate for the fact you've got no visual track, or you've got no audio, or you've got no, whatever it is. So actually, this idea that comics are a simple form is incredibly wrong. Neurologically incredibly wrong.
Absolutely.
So that's why. Again, it's about the artist needs to provide physical performances for the characters, body language, facial expressions, and that stuff is so important. There's one sort of compositional cliche that I really want to make sure that I never fall into. It's the fucking talking head. Shot, reverse shot, head.
Yeah.
And the story's not moving.
Yeah.
We're actually waiting while this chunk of dialogue is just downloaded.
Yeah.
And then the story
And that's what it feels
up.
like when you read it.
So things always happen.
Yeah.
So if I've got people talking, we have to have a conversation, they have to have an argument or whatever, and they're mediating some kind of relationship thing at the same time as they're trying to move the story forward for us. They're doing something at the same time. Whether it's traveling and we're showing a shift in location, or whether there's actually something going on that they're physically doing as they're doing. I want to have as much happening in the different tracks and the different layers as possible.
I think that's
you never have the bass line repeating the melody at the same time.
You've always had that. It's been lucky with a lot of the artists you've worked with have been good at body language and physical performance, so you should never have to have like someone standing and saying, and I'm really frightened of him, because they should be turned away, and they should be, and then you have the whole thing of what they're saying and what they're doing and how does that, and what are they saying internally and things like that. But I mean, particularly some of the stuff that Stephen Downey did for Slaughterman's Creed, where you had almost like this kind of court set up. In some ways, how the people came in and out, how the distance they kept from each other, how respectful or not respectful, or they said respectful things but they stood in a disrespectful way, or things like that, and you would pick that up.
The scenes that are actually set in Cancer Town are all about establishing dominance and hierarchy, and making sure that everybody understands what you have to explain this without ever having anybody saying, "Look, here are the rules of this place." You have to bleed the information in, which means you have to bleed it out of the characters. So a huge amount of that comes down to Stephen Downey in the first one, Graham Howard.
And then certainly, with the Indifference engine, because obviously all the Allens are Allen. That adds that whole extra thing on for the artists, and both Rob and Russ have done this, is some of those Allens are much more powerful than other Allens. And they are, but just because you're more powerful than the blue one is more powerful than the red one, does the red one accept that? No, not necessarily, because he's still like a human being. He might resent that, he might be afraid, he might look for protection. It's like, and how do you subtly get all of that over? That's fine, you don't need to explain it. You'll understand it as a human, because basically you're constantly, whatever you look at, you're constantly going, shall I eat it? Is it going to eat me? Shall I mate with it? Shall I run away from it? Shall I ignore it? That's all constantly. That's constantly what your brain is doing.
That's brilliant. That's great. And so you guys obviously, do you work together on everything, or?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Most things.
There's like some of the Starship Troopers stuff that I did with Marcosia was lettered by Tom Mauer.
Yeah.
But you've lettered virtually everything. Jim Campbell in one thing. Two.
Yeah. He did and he did.
Oh no, Master Merlini, which is that was an absolute joy to work with, because I worked with Giancarlo Caracuso on this a story about a real world escapologist,
right,
called David Merlini, he's a legit phenomenon,
right,
and he for the longest time held a crazy world record for holding his breath underwater without like hyperoxygenating himself, and he said I think it's actually I heard it's been beaten by some free diving women. All those records, I think, are long term they're held by women. As I don't know whether apparently it's a blood pressure thing, but I don't know. But anyway, he had this thing. He held his breath for like 20 minutes, and I thought, why didn't his brain die? I don't understand. But anyway, I was in this situation of writing this. I'll show you on my phone actually at some point.
Okay.
Because it's the only place that it
because it's an interactive thing.
It's a phone app comic.
Okay.
But the idea was every issue, we'd be setting up the situation where Merlini is trapped inside a comic by a villain,
right?
And this particular villain, and has a lot of in-jokes that only magicians are going to get,
right?
So, I had the background for this.
Yeah.
I was professional for a few years.
Were you really?
Yeah, 3.5 years. But before the writing turned into something I could make money out of. But each issue was going to be we got as far as the first one because unfortunately there was a problem with allowing explosives. We had the first escape that he was going to do was going to be dropped. He was going to be dropped into a hole in the ice on the Hudson River,
Right.
and strapped to a World War II sea mine.
Okay.
In the end, I think probably the Boston bombing kind of put.
Okay.
But I was in a situation where I was in collaboration with this world-class professional escapologist. I was going to be devising an escape to do in the story that then the real David Merlini would have to do for real as part of the story, because succeeding in the escape was what would bring him out into the real world again for a limited period before he got sucked back into the comic for the next thing. Then he was going to sort of drop out of sight, and we'd do another issue of the comic, and then he'd escape and reappear in real world and be travelling the world and doing all this
And he
stuff.
had a blog, didn't he, a Facebook page
yeah.
where it was going to be like someone trying to track him around the world, where had he escaped and managed to break free of the
That's
trap.
fantastic.
And he really committed to the concept
That's
of it.
great.
He had the costume made up, so the costume that Giancarlo devised, I believe, that was then they had it made up, not mocked up, made up.
And he had a car changed, and he had his car changed so it matched the art of the car in the comic and things like that.
He had he voiced, because the comic has actual voice acting all the way through it.
Right. Yeah.
So he actually voices himself in it. So I've put the words in the mouth of this guy. I've also written him into a situation where he could very probably die. And we were going to do 6 of these things. But that was just an absolute joy to work on, and that was that was
but there was the thing,
there.
where he rang you up, didn't he?
Yeah.
And there was like this weird thing where a character inside
from-
a comic
from
that
my
you've written
comic.
has suddenly rung you up on the phone, is like talking to you about what his adventures that he's been having and
to
what
tell
is he
me how
going
much
to do.
he liked the comic that he was in. And it was just the most sideways moment.
It was just sort of a Grant Morrison moment.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Grant Morrison would kill to have that experience.
I'm sure that happens to him all the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's been on the phone to King Mob a number of times.
Yeah, it's a little bit up from the stage where, if you're just kind of sitting and then a character appears. That's happened to me here a couple of times where you're kind of, I don't know, you're doing any number of sort of mindless tasks, and then a character pops up and goes, "Hello," and you're like, "Who are you?" Like, "Oh, I'm not in anything you're writing currently. You're gonna have to start a new story."
Just come by to introduce myself. Should you need me?
Yeah.
That was the basis of one of my books that will never be.
Okay.
There's written, and I consider it. This was a book where it was the first thing I ever wrote as a comic, pretty much.
Right.
And really,
That's a iconic representation of the story.
All right. Okay.
one of the things I was doing is when I was working as a magician was I was a resident magician to Hamleys of Regent Street.
Amazing.
We were living in London at that time.
Right.
And so this is like a day job gig for a working magician. It's actually a very good way of meeting people, the right people to move on in magic, and getting the flight time in front of an audience. Sometimes you're in a window, sometimes you're at the top of an escalator. But it was. I used to go and eat my lunch up in Golden Square, out around Soho, and a character introduced himself to me at that point, and that became this whole big book, which he had an art team assigned, and a contract. It's actually contracted to a publisher, but I would be very surprised if it went any further than it has now.
Right.
Because the art team got picked up on another professional gig. We made an offer that was literally to refuse.
Sure.
Although now working with that artist again, he's just putting in some concepts for another story.
Yeah.
Which I can't talk about.
That's fine.
Yes,
That's all right.
His concepts are staggering.
Yeah.
And it's every so often somebody just sort of pops up and it's just the exact right person for the job at the exact right moment. But I'm going to say characters do that too. A book I wrote called White Knuckle.
Yeah.
Has the main character in that was somebody that I sat across from in a train on the Underground on the Northern Line. Just this guy around 70.
Right.
Big guy, like tall but not, like just a guy who took up a lot of space, but was still very sort of hunched in on himself, and had these giant gnarled hands, but was otherwise like quite. He was, you'd call him probably scrawny, but he had a sort of wiriness to him even for a guy his age.
Yeah,
but he had these hands that he was constantly squeezing and like as if the knuckles just wouldn't crack, and he needed them to. And he was as if they were, and it occurred to me as he was, probably just a poor arthritic old guy. But it occurred to me that he was just confronted with the physical horror of these hands, and I found myself wondering as I shared 4 stops or something with him, whatever it was, what had those hands driven him to, that he would regard them with such dread. And so I by the time I got off the train and he sailed on to wherever the hell he was going, I had a whole backstory for this fucker, which is horrible now, really. The way that I have psychologically slandered him.
Well, I've got a surprise for you. He's here today. No, that's awesome. And so you guys, when did you guys meet?
1992.
Right. Okay.
We were at university together.
Oh, right. Okay.
At Canterbury.
First year was my last.
Yeah. I was seduced. I just have to put that on record now. I was only 18.
With a magic trick, which is the one time that has ever happened, regardless what the books and hypnotherapy courses are going to teach you.
Right.
Yeah. No, I tell you, but I was in a shared house with a friend of mine, and so I went down to the house and we were having a chat, and he overheard me say in conversation, and Alien is better than Aliens. And I know, actually, that was the moment. that was
the click, right?
Yeah,
there.
He probably thought, I'm quite interested in her, but I know that was the moment.
It's rare to see wisdom in one so young.
And then you showed me, didn't you, Carney and Hardware, and Death Race 2000, which I think was some kind of test as to how I responded to those films, and obviously I passed that test. So
all in one. So you just grabbed her from the pub.
Here we are today. Yeah, no, actually we met, didn't we? We did meet at what is now the Lady Luck in Canterbury. It wasn't the Lady Luck then; it was called the Three Compasses. But at a friend's birthday party. Yeah. At least that's the first time I met you. You said that you had spied me before.
I introduced you to my comics dealer before I introduced you to my parents.
Yes, that's true. Yes, to whatever comics.
Because you've got to have priorities. So there's a sequence that these things have to be done, and you needed to understand that side.
Because that was the first present that you bought me, wasn't it? It was an original run of V for Vendetta.
Nice.
And A Reese's Positive. Giga's A Reese's Positive.
Oh right, okay,
artbook. Before I met your family, V for Vendetta.
Because if Annie of whatever comics didn't approve,
that was it.
Yeah.
There was a problem.
That's great. That's fantastic.
So I found a photo somewhere of a first thing that I drew for you, actually.
Which one?
That thing, you remember what did eventually become, the two-sided story, what did eventually become Cancer Town. Well, not all of it, but some elements of it made their way into Cancer Town. There's still
you had that
crosshair.
Crosshair, when Crosshair was a much larger character than a physically larger character.
Yeah.
He became scrawnier as time went on, because I decided I wanted to go more for like a Tim Roth look.
Sure.
Yeah. So if Tim Roth is available,
for the movie rights,
Tim, we'd like to invite you.
I think it would make a great series.
I mean, you can't really not make a cast list these days, because comic book adaptations to films are now such a thing. It's an accepted part of the transition that you have to go through comics into a much more legitimate art form. So, and as much as I reject that, I'd sign the contract, wouldn't I?
You'd have to, wouldn't you? Really?
Yeah. I mean, there's been interest in several of my books. I've had some quite well noted directors that I probably shouldn't name have had my books on their desks.
Sure.
And there's interest in another one of the stories now from an indie filmmaker. I'm very excited to see if anything happens.
Okay.
But these things take forever. And
they really do, yeah.
and probably never come to anything. So I try not to get my hopes up, but But I do. I mean, you have to, because apart from anything else, when you're explaining to an artist what you think a character should look like before you release it into their hands, where they do their part of the job, which is to decide what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
So I mean, you get like a Mark Strong look for Sidney the Slaughterman in the Slaughterman's Creed, or as a character now that's come in as a kind of a cross between Jai Courtney and Tom Hardy,
right?
Which the artist came up with more or less on his own, and that was just ideal for what I was thinking for him. And so yeah, it helps to have a little idea in your head about what the characters are going to, because again, it's about the physical performance, and you give somebody a step up that they can then build from.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's always going to be the artist's responsibility to make that character live. So it doesn't do you any good to get sort of hung up on, no, I said like this. There's nothing worse than nothing kills a comic, nothing strangles a comic more thoroughly and more reliably than a writer who's too keen to hear his own voice on the page.
Yeah.
Who's too desperate not to let go of their original ideas and won't play with the band.
Yeah.
Won't actually.
Yeah.
Who doesn't understand that you need to have these other viewpoints. You need
absolutely.
To have
yeah.
The whole thing is it's completely sterile if it's just one. I mean, that's where you've got multiple creative inputs. There are a lot of writer artists who do phenomenal work on their own, but where you're working as a collaboration, you haven't hired an illustrator. You're working with a co-creator.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or more.
Absolutely.
4 or 5 of you in some cases.
So I'd be remiss not to mention the stacks of board games and memorabilia in the room that we're sitting in now, with the workout equipment pushed to the side. What is it? Is that sort of the main thing you guys do in your downtime, or?
Between that and we have an extensive PlayStation library, going back as far as PlayStation 1.
And I've got a new bass guitar for Valentine's Day, so
I saw.
Just learning to play that. Yeah. So, about this far so far, like 2 things been.
So we have a bunch of stuff that we do that is not. We're not one of those couples that has like separate lives and what have you. We're more or less a package deal at this point.
Yeah, it does disconcert people who talk to one of us and then find out it's as if that they've been talking to both of us. We are just able to drop in and out of conversations.
Yeah. That's great though.
So I think probably X-Wing is our favourite at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, X-Wing Netrunner taking up a lot of our time. Now, I mean,
now there's a decimator. That's my thing.
Now there's a
round people with the decimator.
Indeed.
That's the game destroyed in perpetuity now because arc dodging is a thing of the past.
I don't really have any defensive plans in my gaming, so decimator is perfect.
Brilliant.
Phantom,
okay.
yeah.
Do you guys hold nights, or is it just you guys, or?
Generally just us, but we're set up to accommodate more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you ever want a third, I'm available. Drop me a message.
Yeah.
I live about 40 minutes away, and I'll bring my slave one. I don't know how to pilot or do anything with.
It's hard, isn't it? Slave one. I've never been able to fly it well. Slave one. I don't. Also, it reminds me of a snail on the inside of an aquarium. You know how it's kind of looks like it's kind of got that like that.
Yeah.
So it just looks like it's creeping along the battlefield to me. Like.
This goes right back to how we started out in comics, because our first professional gig. First paid gig was actually.
It was such a that and got distracted.
Yeah, it came from Mongoose Publishing.
Right.
We were putting out. They put out. I was a playtester. We were playtesting rather on Gangs of Mega City 1, which is probably somewhere. There's.
I can see the Judge Dredd role-playing game.
Yeah, that stuff as well. Starship Troopers role-playing game.
Yeah.
But the main one was Starship Troopers, the miniatures game.
Wow.
Which you notice we have 2 copies, and all of this stuff here basically is Starship Troopers stuff. So we've got boxes and boxes of this stuff. That a lot of it was just given to us for free because we were doing this this comic for them.
Yeah.
So they started out. They got the rights to Starship Troopers to make the role-playing game and the miniatures game, and it turned out that along with that sort of a package deal came the rights to the to make comics out of it. So they had an online sort of PDF magazine called Signs and Portents that may still exist. I haven't checked that recently, but it had like, I was told at one point that while we were doing this Starship Troopers comic, it had a readership of like 60,000 downloads.
Right.
So you could add up every individual reader of literally every other word I've written in comics, and you wouldn't match what we
You wouldn't be getting 60,000 a month, no.
What we were pulling down in 1 month. People who just happened to be reading our strip in this magazine.
Sure.
They were getting. But so I'd originally they said we're looking to do comics. Does anybody want to write for us? Because I'd been playtesting for them, I got this message, and said and I pitched them this idea that they were originally thinking of doing like graphic novels with, and then at the same time Tony Lee was pitching, and he went one direction, and they put out physical graphic novels with him. And we went the other direction and went with the digital. Sure. So and then that lasted for
about 2 years.
Damn near 2 years on a monthly schedule, with Nick doing all the art and all the lettering.
And I'm not really, my art is horror art. That was fine for the bugs and the stuff like that. Perspective, machines, guns, things like that I find really, really difficult. That was obviously an ideal thing to do for my first comic. So power suits were really difficult, like chicken walkers, what are they called? Those
chicken hawks. Yeah.
Chicken hawks, yeah.
Yeah.
God, so I was always trying. Luckily, they were always often, blown up and twisted and stuff like that, so you could sort of mess with them. You didn't have to.
So that made me apparently kind of the natural fit for when the rights went to Marcosia, and they were doing the ongoing comic for that. That I was sort of the guy that they handpicked to take over when Tony moved on from that. Yeah. And then he became the editor, and then I was writing that. And that was around about the same time, because I landed. I got talking to Marcosia there at this same convention where I got an acceptance on Cancertown.
Although it wasn't with Marcosia then, it was with this other publisher, which...
it was 2007.
Right.
8,
yeah,
7. It came out in 9, didn't it come out in 2009?
Cancertown came out in 2009 because that took a longer time to put together, but January 2008 was my first Marcosia Starship Troopers. Yeah. And so that all happened in a rush there. And it sort of snowballed rather more comprehensively than we'd anticipated. Right. But that's fine. It was welcome.
There's lots more. There's lots of things now becoming sort of cross media in that way, isn't there? I've seen there's like novels of computer games and I know the Gears of War had a comic that was painted by Liam Sharp. I think did phenomenally well. It's beautiful.
But didn't get factored into any of the big lists because it was not somehow considered to be eligible, even though it was the best-selling comic of all time or whatever the hell it was. It was certainly the
it didn't go through Diamond. It obviously went out.
So it didn't get factored into the top. So that's not a real comic. But there are some odd prejudices still.
I think there's Netrunner novels, aren't there?
I don't know. Yes, there are. No, you're right. There are. Sorry, yes. Like so Strange Flesh, and they do excerpts for them in some of their booster packs. Right?
Sure.
But they the fascinating thing is when we got in as we did, it was considered an unusual method of sort of sidling in, because back then the wisdom was that you had to pitch 50 or 60 times to 2000 AD for an 8-page thing, and then try and work your way through and so on. And we sort of we joked at the time that it's about finding a better technology for cheating your way in. Yeah, which is what we ultimately ended up doing. Yeah. But since then, what's fascinating to me now is the number of new ways that the people coming up, people breaking in now are finding, because there's digital comics have been embraced now in a way that they were not. Yeah. Even as recently as 2007, 8, 9. and there's crowdfunding now, which essentially did not exist.
Yeah, technology has changed, so you can get your own print runs done, things like that, much more cheaper. You can get digital print on demand, so you don't have to say, oh, you have to have 2,000 things printed at once so people can do it. Or there's so many different media, aren't there, and things wanting comics as tie-ins or adaptations, or it's just exploded, hasn't it? Really?
Yeah, and we were excited enough to have found that there were new ways, and people were self-publishing. Not as a fallback position, but increasingly they were becoming, self-publishing was becoming their first choice. Yeah, because it was for them the best way to get their vision. And
obviously you get to keep all the rights, and you're fully in control of the creation and things like that. So it's like it's happened in other industries. It happened in music before it happened in publishing. And
absolutely.
Stuff like that. So film, obviously. So it's just kind of very interesting how all those things change, and how long then it takes various different companies or things to respond to them, and the change has already happened and gone on to the next change by the time you get that. That's just something that something that I have to keep an eye on for work. So it's just kind of
we're literally now, I think, at the point where of all the people I know in comics, I don't know anybody who got in through the
traditional method.
So I don't know anybody who's done that.
No.
Now, I think the last person I even heard of doing it that way was probably Sispuria, whom I don't actually know, although I've spoken to him a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe Al Ewing. Al Ewing's got a. I mean, there are as many routes in now, it seems, as there are people who are pursuing them.
Yeah. But you don't even need to go through a gatekeeper anymore. You can just start putting your stuff up online. And if you can get a massive following online, I mean, it's much like the Starship Troopers thing. You would not, as a first-time person putting out a comic, get in front of 60,000 people. But now, if someone was to start today, it wouldn't be unusual to find out your webcomic had got 60,000 downloads and had a following, and you had a Patreon even, and people were paying for it and things like that. So. Or you're putting it on, people doing animations and things, putting them on YouTube. They get huge followings.
Absolutely, and I mean that's what that's how I relate to podcasting, because podcasting is kind of the new punk rock. You can like the setup I've got here is quite a pricey one, but I started out with a shitty little mic that I bought for £3 and my shitty little laptop on a shitty program, and I was doing this to people, kind of putting it in their faces, and it's the ability to say what the hell you want, how the hell you want to say it. You can go on for as long or as little as you want. The fact that I've got it up on a website means nothing. Like, if Geek Pride won't take me, then I'll just start my own website with blackjack and hookers. But it's, and you're completely right. We now live in a time where you can produce your own content, manage your own content, output your own content in a way that you want to do it directly to the people that are going to want to hear it and listen to it.
The interesting thing about that is TV. People don't want to really watch broadcast TV now at a time when they're told to watch it, in the order they're told to watch it on the day. So you get things like Netflix originals and things like that coming up, and they're putting out. They still, obviously still call them box sets of stuff. But there's all of that, and then aside from that, there's the YouTube programs, and there's specialist programs, and very professionally done on YouTube that would not get a slot. And if they were put on broadcast TV, it cost them an awful amount of money for the bandwidth. And
absolutely.
And yet they've got followings in the millions, and you would never get millions of viewers if that went on broadcast TV.
It's a legitimate career.
Yeah.
A professional
YouTuber is absolutely.
YouTube is what I have instead of a TV service.
Yeah,
now.
They make money from advertising directly, and you don't have, in America, you don't have like, oh no, you can't do that, or no, we're having an advertiser who wants this, so they want this, reflected in the content, or you can't.
Absolutely.
And it's pure. If people like it, they will watch it, and if they don't like it, they won't watch it. And it's kind of a purity to it in that way.
So but never read the comments.
Never read the comments.
There's the resistance of it, obviously, from the general inertia of the embedded, industry.
Yeah.
But people are just ignoring that.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
I don't remember the last time I watched anything that had an advert in it that wasn't just like the beginning of a YouTube clip.
Yeah.
We don't
So even if people record
TV,
things,
they
they
don't
like
consume our television.
Absolutely.
Adverts,
Yeah. I mean, since I've had Netflix, I haven't watched. I watched terrestrial TV once since that time. That's because my friend wanted to watch the rugby, which I afforded him because it was his birthday.
And the only time we don't really watch it live, do we? We only watch it on iPlayer, and that's usually when I want to watch something historical that I'm going to necessarily sit down and watch it at 8 o'clock on Thursday when they say.
Yeah, exactly.
And things like, I don't know if you liked Breaking Bad and now Better Call Saul has come out on Netflix, is you wouldn't think Netflix original, that's going to be some sort of low budget kind of. No, it isn't. It's like some of the best TV that's going.
It's completely credible. The whole thing is
awesome. Well, guys, it's been just over an hour. It's probably about another 3 hours worth of stuff I want to talk to you about, music and films. We haven't even touched on that. But for now, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you very much. It's been incredible listening to you both. And for anyone that's sort of looking to get into comics or looking to get into writing or any kind of creative venture, I think this was the perfect first episode for you, because this has given you all the advice you need, which is essentially get out there, pay attention to the rules, of your craft, and know when to break them. I've been the Resident Beard, Mike Orvis, and keep it freaky. See you later. Bye.